All right, let's get started. Welcome, folks. Welcome back to the second class. So we're doing something slightly different this class where we are starting the class with a chant. So let me share my screen and we can get started. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Perfect. So we're going to start this class with this chant. It's the Shanti mantra, which is basically a chant that is used to put ourselves in a frame of mind of I guess, openness and acceptance of what we are going to receive. So the way this works is, I would chant a line and then you can kind of understand how the tune is and I would chant the line again. So we'll go through each line twice. So feel free to either join or just listen, that's up to you. But maybe make sure you mute it because otherwise there's a lot of interference. Okay. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Om. So the English translation of this mantra is this, and we want to do this from the when we start something new, we take on any project, we want to sort of keep this in the back of our minds because whatever work we are doing in life, we are doing it so that we can free ourselves. Free ourselves from what? Free ourselves from the bondages that we hang on to. So the first line was, hope this study, this class leads us from untruth to truth, from darkness. So the word was tamas in the chant, which stands for ignorance. That's something that we covered last class. So from darkness to light, from death to immortality. And we say peace 3 times to signify the 3 externals that we experience: the external environment, our external physical bodies, and our internal mind. All 3 of them are external from the perspective of who we really are. So we are sort of hoping and wishing that all of those aspects of us are peaceful so we can drop in and be present to this class. So beautiful verse and kind of describes what and why we do this work. Okay, so last class, for those of you who weren't here, we covered the concept of the gunas, which are essentially qualities of the mind. There's 3 kinds of gunas. There's tamas, which is the lowest form, which has the qualities of laziness, ignorance, darkness is another way that we think about it. Basically, where our ego sense is very contracted, we feel like not doing anything, we kind of tend to be inactive, and we just want to stay in bed. So that's tamas. The next one, which is and they all sort of progress from one to the next. So from tamas, you can go to rajas, which is from inactivity, I can go to activity where, I can do some work. And in this state of rajas, we have all of our desires. We want to achieve things in life. We want to do all of our projects. We want to be successful. We want to be famous. We want to like be good at our jobs. All of these ideas that we have and these desires that we have, this is the frame of mind where we kind of tend to express them. And all of them have this sense of egoism associated to it. So, I want to be famous. I want to be successful. And because there's a sense of ego, there's also a sense of fear, because wherever there's a sense of ego, there is a sense of trying to defend and protect this ego. And whenever there's a sense of this lack and sense of wanting to protect, a consequence to that would be fear. Consequences of that would be, anger when things don't work out the way you want them to. And when you lose the things you do have, there's a lot of fear. So all these sort of emotions are all tied to this rajasic quality that our mind tends to be in when we have these desires. So from tamas, we can move to rajas, which is the sense of egoism, where we want to achieve and fulfill our desires. And then the last one is sattva. And in this state, we are still doing active actions, but we are doing them from a place of no ego. So when we are doing those actions, we are not even thinking about ourselves, because we are so focused on the task, about ourselves. So a good example that I keep repeating is, when we are so lost in a project that we have forgotten the sense of time, we've forgotten why we are even doing it. We just focused on the task. We're not thinking about whether this is going to benefit us, whether we're going to look good. All these ideas that sort of come up when we do things from an egoistic standpoint, all of them are gone in the state of sattva. So there's these three states, and we got the idea last week that action is better than inaction. And now you can see why, because inactivity comes from a state of tamas, which is, I don't want to do something, even though we need to do it because it's necessary, right? Like if, let's say we have to submit this project on Monday, and we're just lazy and we don't do it, we are delaying the inevitable, which is, you either have to do it, or we're going to scramble, or we're going to get fired, or whatever. There's going to be consequences to not doing it. But because of being in the state of tamas, which is ignorance, we are not able to see the consequences of what's going to happen if I don't, do this action that I need to do. So the only way to sort of do that is to stimulate ourselves to do it and sort of move from tamas to rajas. So, in the last class, we said action is better than inaction. So this is why action is better than inaction. And then finally, we want to go to a state of sattva, and we'll see kind of how we go there. So any questions about this? Anybody has any thoughts about anything that may have come up last week? Okay. If you do, feel free. For the folks who are new here, feel free to interrupt me at any moment. Ask any question if something doesn't make sense. I'm happy to go over it again, or any ideas or questions that you may have, which may not be related to this, and that's totally fine as well. Encourage you to ask questions, because believe it or not, other people also have the same questions as you. So when you ask a question, you're actually helping other people. So we were at verse 8, I believe, last time. So we're going to do verse 9. Is there anybody who would like to chant the Sanskrit? Going once, going twice? Okay, I'll do it. And I can read the English as well. Or is there anyone who would like to do the English? English is probably easier.
Yeah, me.
Okay, Devi, perfect. So verse 9. Yagyarthart karmano yantra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sanga samachara.
The world is bound by actions other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. Do thou, therefore, O son of Kunti, perform action for that sake for yajna alone, free from all attachment.
Okay, so here, the context of the story is that Krishna is, in the battlefield, and he is telling Arjuna to go and do his duty, to go and fight the battle. And he's giving him the context of what the world is. And he's basically saying that the world is bound by actions um, other than those performed for the sake of sacrifice. So there's two kinds of actions in this world: actions that lead us to more bondage, and action that sort of free us, or actions that don't accumulate more, I guess, baggage and bondage. And the idea here is that whatever action that we do, if we do it from a sense of ego, it is creating more bondage. If we do actions from a sense of egolessness, which is kind of confusing to say, oh, how do I do something egoless without ego? He's giving a practice here, which is saying performed for the sake of sacrifice, which is you are offering whatever action that we are doing, we are offering it to somebody else. So usually, in Hindu context, there's all these different deities that represent different aspects of life. So there's a deity for studying, there's a deity for music, there's a deity for arts, there's basically everything. So whenever we sort of you don't have to believe in any of this, but whenever you perform any action which is just in your making a painting, whenever you're painting, the practice here is that we are doing this for the love of painting, or there is this divine painting, I would say, art or artistic creativity that exists in this world, and we are sort of adding to that, and we are sort of offering this art to that. So what this is doing is that when the consequence of making this painting, and when people comment and say, wow, this is a beautiful painting, our sense of ego does not develop. And the reason why we don't want to develop our ego is because if we start to identify with the fact that we are an awesome painter, that we are the best painter, all of these ideas, when that changes, we're going to feel horrible, because we are no longer, because all of our sort of identity was built on this idea that we are the best painter. So some action, so in this case, this the action that the painter would do would be to create this painting, and then if he sort of takes all credit for the fact that it's a beautiful painting, or she takes all credit, their identity of that they're a great painter or a best painter is getting more and more concretized. And instead, if the painter would make a beautiful painting and say, it is not me, but like divine creative energy flew through me, and this painting is a result, that kind of is slightly better, because you're not associating that my sense of ego to this painting. Somewhere some idea came through me and this painting appeared, and because we are not creating more bonds, when, let's say, I no longer can paint, it's not going to be as much of a big deal than when I lose my ability to paint, and my entire identity of life was that I was a painter. So that's kind of the implication of this verse. And here the sacrifice means that I'm offering whatever work that I do to somebody else. So I could say, I can offer, the painting to my teacher, to say, actually, I'm not very good. It was because of my teacher that I became, I have the skills, but it's not because of me, it's because of somebody else. So we're kind of like not hanging on to this idea that I am really good, or I am the best, and the same thing even when we fail, which is like when we do things which don't work out. So if I create a shitty painting, I can still say that it's not me who made the painting. It was, it was like because of my shitty teacher, I still got, it works both ways, which is when you succeed in life, offer or rather offer all actions to something higher than you, or something somebody else, because then we are not sort of accumulating the bonds and the consequences of identifying with those actions. So the verse here is saying that, always perform action for the sake of sacrifice, which is always offer your actions to something else and not to your own self, because then you're not going to accumulate these bonds and you're going to be free from those attachments. Does that make sense? Any questions about this? We're going to go over some of this as well, but this is the idea that is being presented, that when we do actions, do not think of it as I am doing the actions, because when you say I am doing the actions, we will have to face the consequences of those actions, and usually they tend to be good. And when we think that when they're good, we identify and say, I am a powerful person, I am a successful person, I am, the smart and intelligent person, which, will feel good in the moment. But when it doesn't work out, because, projects sometimes succeed or fail, when it doesn't work out, because in the past I identified and created this, image that I am a intelligent and successful person, when our actions are against that image, or when the outcome is against that image, we're going to feel shitty and miserable. So, so that's the idea here. Any thoughts and questions?
I have a question. So in the Rajas state of mind, it's kind of easy to be motivated by trying to be the best at what you do, right? So for example, in this painting example, you can say that, okay, I want to be the best painter, and you can push yourself to be the best painter, or push the limits to do your best.
Correct.
Whereas if you have a state of mind where you feel like the creative energy is kind of flowing through you and you're kind of painting, where will the push come from? Would you even push yourself to do your best, or you'll just do what comes to you at that point in time and just leave it at that?
It's a good question. So the push will come from the love of the work. So, most painters who are good because they love painting, and not because they, have this idea that they want to be of course you want to strive to be excellent and you want to strive to be the best, but this idea of the best is also so silly, right? Like, does it mean to be the best? Like, who says you are the best painter? Somebody says, one magazine would say you are the best painter, but does that really make you the best? But I think more about, like, where does motivation come is, I think, the question that you're asking. I think the motivation would come from the love and the joy of the activity itself. When I paint, I feel really good. Or when I'm painting, I'm lost in the art of paint, like in the task of painting. And when I'm lost in that activity, I'm just blissful. And that's where the motivation comes from. And when I don't care about the outcome so much, that kind of frees me from being able to, do whatever I want. So even like in creative expression, if I don't care about like the outcome, I can express myself in whatever way I want, and it doesn't bind me as much. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. I think it does. I think, like, from what I understand, you still care about the outcome, but not like in an egoistic way. You still care about making the best painting,
sure,
but not associating yourself with that. Or
right. Yeah, you still want to be, you want to do the best that you can, as in, with the abilities that you have, and you want to, give it your 100%. But that's all you can do, right? And what comes out is what comes out. There's no sense of, like, I would say, I wish I could have done better, or I wish, those sort of like regrets and like things that sort of end up after the fact that you have done something, because the sense of ego isn't quite there when you're doing the work. So, which doesn't mean that, you don't want to improve and things like that. But I'm saying that the sense of, we're going to strive to be solution oriented and growth minded, which is, all right, so let's say I paint something and it turns out to be shitty. instead of saying, oh, I should have done it something in a different way, and I am such a shitty painter, or I didn't, win the competition or whatever it is, we will be more about, okay, what can I do to become better? Like what was something that I didn't think about? Like why did it turn out the way? And be more action oriented. That will lead us to a place that we want to go, which is improve our skills, right? So we kind of switch into thinking that it's not thinking about like, oh, I am shitty, or like building this image and trying to maintain some image about the painter, but it's more about the skill, right? Which is, how can I become a better painter? Because in the end, if you really want to be a painter, that's what you want to do, right? And you want to work on the craft and the vocation. Does that help?
Yep, that helps. Thanks.
Hey, Puneet. So the question of whether you are the question of the fact that you want to be a painter is outside the framework of this phrase, right? I mean, that is a given. And then this is more about how you identify yourself with that task, and how you identify your ego with that task. And so the question of that, like if Arjuna is a warrior, is not being questioned here, right? You are
right. So I think we also covered the fact that people have everybody has a nature, like an inner nature about, I have this artistic nature. Some people have an analytical nature. Some, so that nature will determine what kinds of actions attract you. Some people love to like help other people. Some people are, don't like that. They just like to work on a problem in their own, in their own room or something. So there's this nature of everybody, and we cannot get away from that. So this is saying that, do actions that align with our nature. So that way we're not questioning what we need to do, right? We are aligned with what we are good at. And once we are aligned with that, and once we are aligned with the things that we actually enjoy doing, then, give up the outcomes and like give up the fruits of action, which we will, come to later. But like keep doing actions, because you're doing actions which are aligned to your nature. But what happens is not up to us. Whether we succeed or whether we fail is not just our choice, because, a lot of other factors and forces are at play, which are the cause of whatever happens. But all we can do is we can give it 100%. And offer the outcome to somebody else, or even offer the fact that this action that is being done to something greater than ourselves. So let's say you're doing service. Let's say you're a doctor. We have a couple of doctors here, but let's say you're a doctor. Instead of saying I saved a bunch of people, we offer it to like the service of the doctor community or whatever, right? Like something greater than just our limited sense, which is I'm offering it to humanity, or something greater than just my limited ego, because that doesn't create additional bonds, and that's what we don't want to accumulate, because that will build my sense of ego, and all problems of our own selves are in the ego, which is I'm either good, I am bad, I'm successful, I'm miserable. These sort of dualities and these polar opposites, because at some point we will be successful, but at some point it's only a matter of time when we are unsuccessful, and so all of our efforts is go back to becoming successful. So once we build this image that we are successful or the best or the worst, our entire attention is to maintain this image, which is silly because we are not the image. And the whole sort of process was built on this false image. Our entire life becomes built, about maintaining this false image. So this is saying, just drop the entire image. Or even, I guess in this case, it's saying, do not create more, or do not direct more energy into like maintaining this image. Instead, just like offer all the new actions that you do to something higher than ourselves and something greater than ourselves. So we're not creating more and more bonds. Does that answer your question, Karthik?
Yeah.
Cool. Nice discussions this morning. Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah. To what extent does it matter that we're doing actions that are aligned with our nature?
Does not matter that much. So, very few people get to do actions that really align with our nature.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things that we can do. One is doing actions that align with our nature, and the other is to love the actions that we're doing. Like, what was the phrase? It's like, you either love or you do what you love or love what you do. Both of them are fine. So, but the idea is we don't want to keep thinking about, I wish I could be doing something different. Because if that's where our energy is, about thinking about what is not in front of us, then we will not be able to like completely focus and break out of like this cycle of like being in our minds all the time. The idea is that we don't want to keep being in our minds, and so we want to like get away from that sort of habitual tendencies. So if we are okay with like our current status in life, which is like, this is the work that I'm chosen, this is what I'm doing, it's okay, and I'm going to do this, then we can then take that and sort of use that to free ourselves. But instead, if you're constantly thinking about, oh, I wish I could be doing some other job, my life, this job sucks, or whatever it is, if our energy is always on like, I wish it was something different, then our mind is never going to be in the now. It's always going to be thinking about something in the past or in the future. So we need to start to be conscious of like, okay, how much of my time do I keep thinking about, I wish it was different? Because then we will start to see, okay, 30% of my waking time thinking about, I'm living in a dream world essentially, right? Because I'm not doing what is in front of me. And it's fine to want to change things in life, but do it's like always be action oriented, which is okay. If I want to change it and if I want to go in a different direction, fine. But start to make those things so that in every moment we are sort of committed to whatever is in front of me, which could be like, oh, I'm studying and changing my career path, and I'm studying and learning these other skills which I will use to maybe get a new job or something. But the idea is that we want to be in the moment as much as possible, and in the moment we could be doing things which are moving us in a different direction in life too. But we don't want to keep thinking about, I wish things were different, and that's not very helpful.
So if you're doing a thing, focus on it and examine your motivation and make sure that that's larger than you.
Correct. And that's may not always be possible. So if you're in a tamasic state, I said, it's very hard to go from the tamasic state to the sattvic state. You have to sort of move to a state of rajas, which is, let's say, I'm like, we are in a state where my life sucks, I don't want to do anything. If that's our mind, we do want to motivate ourselves to be, okay, you can be successful. What is it that you really want to do in life? I want to start a bakery or something. Okay, let's do it. And with all of that comes a lot of fear. Will my bakery be successful? There's all this competition. I have never really done it professionally. All these ideas, but that is all good because we're moving from like inactivity to a state of activity. Which is, okay, now I have all these problems in life, which is better than not having any problems. So now I have these problems. Now that I'm in that state, how do I do actions to like not create more and more baggage, which is, I now perform, actions and the results is I give it to the cake god, or like, the bread god or whatever, right? Like, or the best baker in the world, I want to, offer it to that person or whatever, like somebody else, like your grandmother or something. But the idea is that we want to then work. We can only sort of free ourselves from action while we're doing action. So we cannot free ourselves from action when we are just lazily, have like completely aversive to the entire world. We have to be in the world and be free. It's very easy to be free when you're in a cave and you have nothing to do. In fact, we're kind of breaking our mind a little bit by doing that, because in the cave we may be thinking about all the things that we're not doing, and feeling quite shitty as well. But this is saying we got to be in the world and be free. And how do we do that? We offer all of our actions as a sacrifice to something greater than ourselves. Cool. Any other thoughts? Okay, let us do the next one. Okay, number 13. Yagya Shishti Shina Santo Muchyante Sarva Kilbin Shaihi Pujante Te Twadham Papa Ye Panchat Yatma Karanat.
The righteous who eat the remnants of the sacrifices are freed from all sins. But those sinful ones who cook food only for their own sake verily eat but sin.
Cool. So the righteous here are basically people who are following this principle of offering their work to somebody else. In this case, like offering it to the creative forces in the world. So there's this idea of we didn't do this a lot in my family, but in very religious families in Hindu societies, there's this concept of doing puja, and then you apparently offer food to the deity, and then after that is when we eat, and the idea is that we are creating and we're cooking food for somebody else, and whatever remains, like once the others are satisfied, whatever remains, that's when I get what I get my part of it. So in our work, we are always thinking of somebody else. So the idea is that the same idea is that I don't want to keep thinking about my own self. I want to be thinking about other people. And when others are satisfied, when nobody else is left, that's when I will think about myself. And here it's saying that people who only think about their own self, like if I cook food only for myself. So the example here is if I'm cooking food only for myself, I'm never sharing it with anybody else. I'm accumulating more and more karma, which is bondages about my ego. So whenever I would cook food, I would always think about myself, because I will think there's never enough, I will not have enough, or all these ideas that I imagine, because I'm not in this frame of mind of sharing. I'm not developing like values of sharing and all these other things that come with being egoistic. But that's the idea. It's a sort of continuation from the previous verse, which is when I do actions, I want to like give it to somebody else and share the fruits of those actions, and not just benefit myself. And if I do that, if I share my fruits, then the same idea is happening, which is I'm not just thinking about my ego. I'm sort of expanding my sense of who I am to include more people than just myself. And when that happens, that's where peace is. That's where we feel a little bit more joyful, because like most of the time, if we think about it, when we help other people, that's actually when we really feel good. When I just think about even at work, let's say somebody is we're working in a team, and when people ask us questions, when we feel that we have contributed to a project, that's when we feel good, because what has happened is we have not been thinking about just our limited sense of I, like will I be okay. We have now offered our own knowledge, our own skills, and helped somebody else, and just that experience and that thing actually feels really good. And we can take a look at our own experiences, and you'll see that is when we do help other people, we actually feel pretty blissful and happy and content. And when we are always thinking about our own self, am I going to be okay, that sense of fear always comes up. And what's happening is we are concretizing this limited ego. We're making this image more concrete. and that's bad. Bad in the sense it's not useful, and it'll only harm us long term. Any questions about this one?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll hold off if other people have questions first.
You can go for it.
Okay.
Was there some? Okay, go for it, Devi.
So I understand this in theory and it makes a lot of sense, but it troubles me sometimes in practice because I think people, I mean, the most concrete example I can think of is like in my family at home, where, you know, growing up, I saw my grandmom doing this thing where she would cook food for everybody and make sure everybody else had it first, and then she would have it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd say it would bring her joy. Like she would actually say exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
But I worry about that because I wonder if there is also an element of I deserve to be at the table or don't deserve to be at the table that gets conflated with eating the remnants of the sacrifices. And I'm not trying to say that that's exactly what's happening, but I'm thinking about the ways in which people apply this to their lives. And
Mm-hmm.
I worry that structures like patriarchy, for example, are excused perhaps by this idea. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and this isn't only applicable to the kitchen, right? Like the cooking food here could be like any activity. Like that's just an example here. So, you know, doing a work at your own, place that you work at is also cooking food, which is, you know, I'm making something useful. But if I'm making something useful, that's only for my own sake and for my own fulfillment. So I can think of an example like where, you know, we're working in a team and we are all working together. But what happens is, like, if you have a person in your team who just takes all the credit for the work, you know, they may be very successful in life and stuff. But what is actually happening is their ego is constantly contracting, and they don't realize it. Which is, you know, they become more and more fearful over time because, you know, and we have done this. I mean, I've done this too in my own past, which is like, you know, when I think I am not going to be okay, and out of that fear and lack of feeling okay, I act in ways of self-interest. I act in ways of like trying to make sure I look better than somebody else. That's actually, it may work in the social context, which is I may look like I'm doing very well. I may, you know, get a raise or whatever. But from a personal moment to moment experience, it's terrible, because what's happening is I am reinforcing this lack of, you know, the lack that I'll be okay, that I'm fine. I'm reinforcing that aspect of like, I'm not going to be okay. I need to have more. I don't have enough, even though everything is completely fine. But this idea in my head, which is I'm not going to be okay, gets strong deeper and deeper and deeper. And that kind of transcends all our activities and not just work. And we have to be very careful to see, like, when we, you know, in the example that you're saying with your grandmother, if from her perspective, if she thinks that, oh, I need to be in the table there, but I'm here cooking, that's not useful. So we have to do it from a very, this is not like a universally sort of applicable thing. We have to see how this works from our own experience. When I am doing this activity, am I thinking about myself? Like, is this sense of ego constantly coming up where I'm thinking of like, oh, I am the one cooking, nobody helps me, you know, I am, you know, if those are the thoughts in my head, then it's clear that, you know, this is not, you know, I can say, oh, you know, I am being all like sacrificial and cooking for all of you. But if in my mind and my experience is that I am not, you know, getting any help, I am the one who's, you know, this is a patriarchal society, all of that, if that is being concretized, then that's not useful. So we have to examine that, and we have to do actions that open our hearts rather than contract our hearts, if that makes sense, Devi.
Yeah, and she probably never questioned it because she thought that's how it was, and it probably gave her joy.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's questioning it.
Right.
But
And maybe it wasn't a problem to her, and now it's a problem because context and social rules are changing, right? What was okay back then is not okay now. So that keeps changing. So you may have a problem with it, but she may not even think it's a problem, right? So that's also subjective, is my point. Like there's no universal like rule that's applicable to every society. And we have to see it from our own sense. It's just like, if it's bothering you, do something about it. But you cannot imagine that it bothers somebody else. Like you would never know that. So we can only see how am I experiencing this world? Am I feeling, is the sense of ego coming up for me? And if it is, then there's something to look at, because that's my own experience and my own sense. And the whole idea is that I want to free myself. I cannot free my grandmother.
No, I get it. And, I'm sure she's never shared with me how she thinks about it, but my main concern is that in her acceptance of that and her questioning it and joyfully giving to others, she has perhaps developed a sense of I deserve less than, as an attitude towards just her life. And so I'm just wondering about, and I don't think necessarily that if she feels her life is fine, it was probably fine.
Yeah, and the other aspect is we cannot do somebody else's yoga. People have to do their own work to be free. We can notice how people, are suffering, and we can offer them, solace. But the work that people have to do to free themselves is their own work. Nobody else can free themselves other than themselves. Like even the work, like I use ideas and pointers, but that's the work has to be that we have to apply this in our own lives and be free. And this world is full of joys and sorrows, and yeah, I mean, like that's all I can say. Like there's hundreds of people like your grandmother, hundreds people in my family and me too, and we all have to do the work. Nobody can like solve it for us. That is what karma yoga is all about, which is I have the complete power to feel a certain way in this moment. If somebody tells me to feel shitty, if I feel shitty, then they have taken the power away from me. So it's called purushartha, or like purushartha, which is self-effort. We have the full, I guess, power within us to change how we feel moment to moment, and no matter what the external situation. And that's the work that we have to do. And it can only be a subjective experience, because we have no idea how the other person is feeling, even though they say something. Did anyone else have a question too? Sorry,
I actually wanted to like add a little bit to. I mean, I was actually thinking of the same thing, maybe because it's like something. I mean, I think as women we notice this. Like my mother's done this all her life. My grandmother. I'm almost wondering if like, from their point of view, it's a sacrifice, but the fact that they feel like they deserve it is because, someone else in the family made them feel that way. And so they take that and they kind of apply it to their thoughts.
So can you say that again? So they feel like they deserve to feel that way.
They feel like they think that they deserve less because due to someone else's actions and not their own.
Okay.
So an example would be like, I don't know, like if say the grandmother cooks and there are people who've come to eat, and say the grandfather says that no, you'll eat and she'll eat later.
Mm-hmm.
And so that automatically probably makes her feel like she deserves less or she doesn't deserve to. But even though she approached it from a point of view of, okay, I want the rest of the family to eat first because it gives me a lot of joy. But then that can very quickly be turned into a negative emotion based off of what someone else might say or
Yeah. I mean, if it is, then she should do something about it,
correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if she's not doing anything about it, then that's her. I mean, that's her problem. Like that's the like. If somebody is bottling up their emotions and not sharing, then that's their problem, right? Like in the end, we can, like as observers, you can observe and make interpretations of what's going on, but that doesn't like actually, we don't completely get the real picture because we are not experiencing it, right? We can say, okay, I think it's like this, but they are like the person who is feeling a certain way, if they're feeling shitty or if they're feeling whatever, like it's up to them to not feel that way. And the whole idea is that we want to give power back to people to say, hey, you have the full power to feel a certain way and you have the full power to change how you feel. And nobody's going to do it for you. You can have social structures that can sort of, facilitate some things. But in the end, those are not where most of our problems is. It's not in the social structures that much. It's moment to moment, it is in our minds that kind of like come in the way and like kind of, we interpret the world through our minds. And if our minds is where we have all of these sort of egoistic issues, that's where the main focus I think should be. And once we are free, then we can kind of see, okay, then you will know what you need to do, like things about what you need to do and how you can impact, because all those actions are not coming from a sense of lack. It's coming from a sense of like fullness, because you know that the outcome of what I'm trying to do is not really where my happiness is. My happiness is right here, right now, and whatever I do is not going to increase my own happiness. It's going to maybe increase somebody else's happiness, but like I'll always be okay. And if that's where we all are, where we all feel we are okay, then it'll be like interesting to see what people do, because there's no sense of fear. There's no sense of like, I would say like lack, for a lack of a better word. Does that help, Pashmita? I know we kind of went on a tangent a little bit.
Yes,
but
absolutely. Thank you.
But the core of it is that we cannot do other people's yoga, unfortunately. However hard we want to help somebody else, we cannot help them. We can give them, we can inspire them, we can give them some ideas, but everybody individually has to do the work. And it's not about, we can put band-aids, we can like, I always like to say that, we can, if somebody's asking for help, we can help them in the sense of like, we can give them what they want, but the core of the issue of why they're feeling that way is not because they don't have what they want. It's something else. And we can keep offering like, fish, teach a person how to fish. You can keep offering fish, but in the end, we want to teach them how to fish, and it's like, and that's more about like, again, that analogy breaks because it's like something external, but all the fish that we need is within us. And if we can find that source, then all of our problems kind of fall away. And that's the promise of the final place that yoga posits, which is you will reach a place where nothing is needed after. All these ideas of like social acceptance, nobody helps me. All these are like very limited needs and wants, very crude in many ways. And they all will fall away because we have gotten what we always had it. It's just that we never noticed it. And that's the promise of yoga. But great questions. This is good stuff.
Hey Puneet, I have another question, maybe building on what you were just talking about.
Sure.
So, where do you, or how do you know where that line is where you start to realize that this sacrifice, or it's starting to have a negative impact on you? Or is that, again, your ego talking that you are the only one who's sacrificing now? And um, like the fishing example, how do you know when you get to a point where you have done all the fishing so far and you need to just teach your friend or whoever else to start fishing now?
Mm-hmm. So you're asking, like, what's the line between saying, hey, go fend for yourself, versus like me continuing to help them?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a that's a very subjective. There's no one answer fits all there. It'll depend, and if you're answering that question from like you're just thinking about the other person and answering that question, you already have the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking about yourself and answering that question, then the answer may not always be the best answer. But if you can answer the question just thinking about the person as seeing them for the entirety of who they are, your answer is already available to you. So unfortunately, I don't think I will be a best person to answer that question, but intuitively, we all have the answers to the questions we have. We just need to think about those questions from a lack of like, our ego shouldn't come and tarnish the question.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to do those things. It's hard to objectively answer it that way, but all I can say is that you have the full intelligence within you to answer those questions.
Okay.
And sometimes we have to make those choices, which is like, okay, I've helped this person enough. And sometimes we just need to, have that honest conversation with them that, you need to figure this out for yourself. Does that help, Rohit?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay, let's do the next one. (16) Evam pravartati chakram nanuvartaya tihayah adhyayu rindriyaramo mogham partha sajivati.
He who does not follow here the wheel thus set revolving is of a sinful life rejoicing in the senses. He lives in vain, O son of Partha.
All right, so this is a book written many years ago. So he here is just a pronoun. It obviously means any person or human. So any person who does not follow the wheel, and the wheel here is that every action has consequences. And I guess yoga has this idea that this entire world is essentially just desires and action that is trying to fulfill desires, and those actions create further desires. So this whole world is nothing but desires, and you can see that from any living object, which is any living object has a desire to do something, be it a plant trying to grow and get to the sun, be it an animal trying to feed, be it a human being, trying to have, obviously have hundreds of desires, but everything has a seed, which is a desire. And in order to fulfill that desire, we do a lot of action. So, we have a desire for a good life. So we get educated and we get a job, and all of our actions is sort of moving in the direction of like that desire trying to be fulfilled. The difference between human beings and animals is that animals only have limited desires, which is, I want to like procreate, I want to be full, like not hungry. and that's it. But human beings have the capacity to have infinite number of desires. And which is why the human world is, so much more than, I would say, like, there's so many more objects and stuff that are in the human world compared to like the animal world, because humans just have an infinite number of desires, and we are all sort of acting on those desires, and when those desires succeed, we want to have more desires, and we can see that, right? Like when I had some goals when I was much younger, and when those goals have succeeded, now I have new goals, and when those will succeed, I will have even more goals. So those are constantly changing based on the experiences and all of that. And our nature, we're coming back to the nature, our nature is sort of what drives most of our desires. So here, if we understand that everything is sort of, action and effect, we're creating some actions, they have certain effect. There is this rule, this universe is not, just chaos. There is like rules that govern this entire universe. And if we understand those rules, we will be a lot more blissful. If we do not understand those rules, we will be living a life which is full of pain and suffering, because we will always be confused about what the hell is going on. So, for example, all life, everything is temporary in this world. Everything is on loan, if you think about it. Whatever we have gotten, we think that it's permanent. It's not, it's temporary. If we understand that simple rule, that everything is temporary, every experience is temporary, we don't know whether this is the last time we're going to wake up or not. If we understand this simple concept, then everything will become more meaningful. Every interaction can become more meaningful, because we have the capacity to realize what a gift it is to be alive, what a gift it is to be born, just to be a human being. If you think about, human being is the most advanced organism on this planet. A lot of the times when I was young, I was like, man, I wish I was a dog. It's such a chill life. But if you think about it, a dog doesn't have half the number of experience. I mean, not even half, like a percent of experiences that a human being can have. The only problem is that our minds have now become too burdensome, that we're not able to deal with what the mind throws up. But if we can deal with that, with the fact that, we have this mind, this capacity to imagine and dream up anything, including things which are beautiful, including things which are not beautiful. And the things that we dream up about how our life is going to fail is what scares us. And that is now working against us. Instead, if we can use our minds to be more creative and more action oriented and more, do more actions which open our heart, that's going to increase our sense of contentment, peace, and bliss in life. Who does the opposite? That person lives in vain. And that's what this verse is saying, which is, if we live a life of, only wanting to, only looking for like our desires being successful, which is only if my desires are successful, am I happy? That person is going to live is a very painful life, because desires, the success and failures of desires is not in our control. They are, they certainly part of it is, but 95% of it is not. And we put in a lot of effort to kind of fulfill one or two desires, and when they do come true, we feel great, and when most of them fail, we feel miserable, because our investments are in the outcome, which is, this desire has come true or not. But if our investment can be in the work, which is moment to moment, we're working all the time. If our investment can be there and not in the outcome, which is one or two moments, which is, when my project is successful, when I launch this cool thing that I've been working on for like months, those are very few moments in life. But I worked for 6 months, which was painful, and then a day of like celebration because the project went live or something. So ridiculous. But instead, if you can say the 6 months that I worked on was actually the bliss, and whether it worked or not was one day of failure. So we start to see what life is actually. Life is only work. All we get is work. The joys of whether the work is successful or not is up to the Lord, or up to Krishna, or like Jesus or whatever. But all we get is the work. If we can understand this basic principle that all we get is the work, and if we can enjoy that process, then our entire life becomes blissful. And who does not follow that simple law? And here, sinful doesn't mean that, good or bad sin, but it's just that their life is full of pain because they're only looking at outcomes and they're not looking at the process. So that was the sort of gist of this verse. Any questions about this? Okay.
Very well said, Puneet. Just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you. It's all my teacher, not me. All right, so let's do verse 17. Yastvatva maratireva syadatma triptischa manavaha atmanyeva cha santushta tasya karya na vidyate.
But the man who rejoices only in the self, who is satisfied with the self, who is content in the self alone, for him verily there is nothing more to be done.
So this is a beautiful verse. And here the self is, the reason why it's in the capital S is it's talking about who we really are. So yoga is, the whole purpose of yoga is to realize the self. And the self is not some abstract object which is out there. The self is immanent. It is right here, right now. It's that thing within you that sort of illumines this entire world. And we're not going to go too much into that in this text, but the idea is that there is a point that we reach in this work where we realize the fundamental unreality of our own minds. Today, we live from a place that, all my ideas and all my thoughts are, sacred and true and absolute. But the mind is a very small aspect of who we are. Mind, which includes our personality and all of our experiences, our memories, that's a very small aspect of who we really are. And once we realize that there is this sort of substratum, this context in which all of these things appear, this, our minds, our emotions, our thoughts, this entire universe, all appears in the context. And that is the self. And the person who has realized that is content, because all we are seeking is the self, consciously or unconsciously. So an example, the clearest way that I can try to explain that is we are constantly working to satisfy desires. That is our direct experience from a day to day. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, all we are engaged in is to satisfy desires. When a desire comes true, what happens is for a moment, my mind is content and satisfied, which means what? Which is I am enjoying the fruits of whatever I did for like months. Let's say I was working on this project for months and finally it has, been released or, now it's launched and everybody's saying, wow, what a brilliant project. Outcome is great. And I'm enjoying the fruit there, which is people's praises. What has happened in those cases? For a moment or for a few hours or whatever, my mind has no longer any new desires. I'm only focused on enjoying the desire. I mean, enjoy the fruits of all of the work that I had put in. So I have no new desire. So in that moment, I am enjoying my own self, because the self is nothing but the mind freed from desire. I mean, I guess the self is revealed when the mind is free from desire. And when I've successfully gotten something that I want, for a moment, my mind is freed from desire. So in that moment, I feel blissful. Everybody loves to get what they want, right? Which is why this entire world is like on a wheel, which is, I want to get this, I want to get that, because when we get what we want, we feel really good. That is our direct experience. But what yoga is saying is that it's not because of the object that we feel blissful. It's because the object has removed for a moment future desires. Because I'm not thinking about the car that I want when, I'm enjoying this pizza. The pizza is so good. But while I'm enjoying the pizza, I'm not thinking about the car that I want. But once the pizza is done, and now I'm unsatisfied again, now I'm thinking about the car. So now I'm like, okay, I got to increase my salary. I got to do all this. I got to do that. And once I have enough money to buy the car, I buy the car. And for a moment, when I'm driving the car, I'm not thinking about the house that I want. So, it's all about trying to note. So, the exercise here is like, while we are working on a day-to-day, try to notice how you feel when you are satisfied with whatever you got. Notice what the state of your mind is. Same thing with when you're feeling shitty. Notice what is the state of your mind. Does your mind want something? And you will clearly see that when I'm feeling blissful, my mind doesn't want anything. When I'm feeling shitty, my mind wants something. So it's this sort of, craving, feeling of like, I need something, I need this, I need this, I need this. That's when our mind is completely active. But when I'm feeling blissful, when I just got something that I really wanted, I'm not even thinking about anything else. I'm just thinking about what the object that I've gotten, and I'm enjoying it. So start to make friends with both aspects of the mind, which is when it is blissful and when it is feeling really shitty. And you will see that, desire itself is the cause of the problem. Not to say we shouldn't satisfy desires, but just to recognize that the desire is what, the insistent desire is what is suffering. No desire is bliss. So the person who has realized that can now knows for a fact from direct experience that the mind is just a temporary experience that comes in and has the ability to drop the mind. Once the person has an ability to drop the mind, then they have access to this bliss constantly, out of like, it's always there. Like, in the sense, like, you can always have access to that blissful state, even when in intense activity, because all it takes is a moment to drop the mind. And for that person, there's nothing more to be done, because whatever activity they do, what is it going to give you? It's going to give you the same bliss that is available all the time. So which is why they say, self-realization is the goal of human life, because once we reach that goal, there's nothing more to be gained, because whatever you gain from that point on is going to be the self, the bliss of the self. So this is, if this doesn't make sense, put it on the shelf. This idea is going to come back again. But this is essentially describing the state of where we want to get to, which is, I want to be satisfied by my own self without any external object. And this is a place that we can get to. This is not a theoretical concept. Any thoughts or questions about this?
I had a question. So is this state of mind a stable state, or is it something like, working out that you need to constantly work towards trying to even to maintain that state?
Good question. So it's not a state of mind. So mind is the problem. It's the state of who you really are. Mind is something that comes in and goes. So the mind can be blissful, the mind can be, the mind can be joyful, the mind can be fearful. But so long as if we think about the mind as real and concrete, our attention is always going to be on the mind. But if we know that the mind is something that is just like clouds that are passing by, our attention on the mind kind of starts to fade away. And the moment the attention on the mind starts to fade away, the mind kind of disappears. Because mind is nothing but our attention being on something external. I have a thought about, oh, this, I'm just, let's say an example is I'm looking at the sky or looking at the clouds. You can be really enjoying the clouds without really having any thoughts about anything. But I can look at a particular cloud and have a thought, and then I can have a reflection about that thought. So I can keep building more and more thoughts and, creating a story about the cloud. And that is the mind, which is, it is, a reflection on something, some input that's coming in through your senses. If we can drop that, the reflection aspect of it, the bliss is there in the background. So your question of like, do we have to maintain it? The practice in the beginning is to understand that the mind is, you are not the mind. So that is very hard to get to, because for this entire life we have believed that we are the mind and this personality. So we are very sort of, our entire identity is in the mind, a collection of ideas about, I am this kind of a person, I'm that kind of a person, I am this human, I have these ideas, I have this body. All of those are essentially ideas in the mind. And our attention is going to be on those ideas when we think they're true, right? So if somebody comes and says, you suck, immediately our identity will be, which is like, oh, actually I don't suck, I think I'm actually pretty good. That idea will sort of come up in our minds, and our entire attention is going to be on trying to defend that idea. But if we don't consider ourselves like good or bad, if somebody says anything, it kind of passes by like a cloud, which is like, oh, you suck, okay, and then it's gone, instead of us trying to like defend it and try to be correct and whatever it is that we want to do. And we may want to do that, but the whole idea is that we don't want to take it super seriously, because when we do, we are sort of concretizing this belief that we are this mind. But it's a practice, Prashant. Like, it's not going to just come, but the final goal is that you don't have to maintain it. It's not like you're exercising and building a muscle. You already worked, and that's why it's called a state of perfection, because it's not something that is gained. Because if it's something that is gained, it can be easily something that's lost. It's a perfect state because we all already are it. It's just that we cannot see it, and once we see it, we cannot unsee it. And that's basically it. It's kind of like, how you have those puzzles where like there's a face in it or like a vase in it. It's like two things and you can only see one or the other. But once you see both of them, you can never unsee it. Or it's like, you're looking at a cloud and somebody says, hey, there's a face in the cloud. And you're like, where? I can't see it. And then somebody says, can you look at that? It looks like a nose. And you look at that. And once you see that, you can never unsee the face, because you've seen it. Your mind has grasped it. So it's kind of the same idea, which is, once you see that you are the self, you're not the mind. It's always there. When are you not you? You're always you. And we will get more into this idea over the course of this course. But does that make sense, Prashant?
Yep, that helps. Thanks.
Cool. So we are hitting the end of the course section. So let's do some meditation before the end of the class. Any final thoughts or questions before we do our meditation?
Hey, Puneet, quick question about just meditation, the idea of meditation. Like, is it, do you find other states of meditation or other ways of meditating other than closing your eyes and trying to focus, like just from the perspective of, karma yoga? I mean, in a sense, you are, being in the sattvic state of being where you're completely in a meditative state in a sense, right? So can you meditate, like in this 10, 15 minutes that you do meditation, can we do that? Can I draw something while I'm meditating? Or is that?
Not in this class, but you feel free to draw something after. So we want to use this time to actually practice them, like close-eyed meditation. And there's a reason for that, because when you're closing your eyes and like meditating, you're blocking inputs, sensory inputs. And when you're blocking sensory inputs, what tends to happen is deep-rooted, I would say the technical term in this work is called vasana, which is, deep impressions of the past, egoistic impressions of the past start to bubble up. And because they start to bubble up, we can start to become more conscious of like, what are these egoistic impressions? And we want to stay conscious of that and stay aware to it. Because when you're painting and drawing, it's great for like focus and like trying to concentrate and build this ability of the mind to have single pointed attention, but it doesn't deal with the core issues, which is essentially vasana purgation. We want to like destroy all of these egoistic impressions of the past. And we can only destroy them when we are conscious of what they are. And, but, you can practice, like the whole idea is that, yes, we get these 20 minutes to meditate, but then you have the entire waking state to do single pointed attention, which is, when you're doing your work, there's nobody telling you to like think about 10 things and work. It's like you think about the one thing and work, and you're doing the same thing, which is like, I'm building my ability to just focus on this one aspect of what I'm trying to do. It just so happens that our world today is like kind of unfortunate, where we have so many distractions all the time. We have to answer messages, email thing, but if we can start to like develop this practice of single pointed focus, which is, even when I'm answering email, I will just think of email. And I'm answering, talking to some friend, I'm just doing that, like just trying to be focused all the time. Then naturally our meditation also will become much, much better. So we're kind of aligning on all sides. It's like we have a candle, we're burning it on both ends, not just on one end. Or even like in the middle, I don't know, all places, trying to light a fire everywhere. The idea is we want to burn everything. And the more we can be conscious of what is going on, the faster the fire is going to burn. But please. Okay. So everybody, please sit up if you're not. Make sure you don't have to like sit on a chair. You can sit on a bed, that's fine too. But make sure you're sitting up and your eyes are closed. If you're feeling sleepy, you can keep your eyes open. And let's start by taking a few deep breaths. So you want to take some conscious, deep, long breaths, because it feels good to breathe. So you take a deep breath, and then on the exhale, just imagine you're releasing all of the stress and tension that you may be holding on to. And you're getting more and more conscious that you have a body. A body that is doing a bunch of things, bunch of reactions going on. Circulation, digestion, assimilation, repairing, all these things happening in this body. So just by breathing, our focus on the breath reveals to us this hugely complex body that we have. So continue to take longer breaths, conscious breaths. And while we are doing that, also start to pay attention to the fact that a body that we are feeling is an experience to us. So we are experiencing the breath, just like we experience a picture on a TV, on a theater. Just so happens that it's slightly closer. That's the difference. But it's an experience, it's an external experience, just like a sound or an image. So the meditation practice we want to start to use is this practice of subject-object discrimination. So we're going to start to notice that all of the experiences that we have, be it sensual experiences, sensations on our body, sounds, images that may be coming up, smells, or even thoughts, memories of the past. You may be thinking about what you want to eat, what you want to do tomorrow. All of those things, they are all experiences that are happening to you. There's something that is illuminating it all. So there's this subject-object relationship with all experiences. So you are the subject, and the thought is the object. You are the subject, and the sound is the object. You are the subject, the breath is the object. So the moment we recognize that, we will see that all of those things are just appearances that exist for a while until our attention is on it. So where did the breath go when we started thinking about the thoughts? It kind of disappeared for a second. So our attention on things concretize the experience for us. If our attention is not on it, it is not available to us. So we want to start to get familiar with this subject, because the objects are constantly changing, but the subject is always there. You, the subject, is the constant. Are varying and diverse. Some of them feel good, some of them don't, but the subject is always there. Objects are temporary. So instead of paying attention to the objects, to our thoughts, our emotions, which keeps changing, try to pay attention to the subject. Try to see who is it or what is it that is illuminating all the objects. And you're not going to see yourself or the subject as an external object. It's like trying to see your own eyes, or it's like trying to taste your own tongue. You're never going to be able to do that. Yet, we can see, we can taste, we can hear. So whenever our attention goes to an object and we start to build more stories about it. So if you're thinking about a past memory and commenting on it, just notice that it is an object in your awareness. The moment we notice that, the story creation stops, and we want to bring ourselves back to the position of noticing the subject, the witness. So we are retraining our minds here. Our senses have outgoing tendencies. Maybe we want to focus on stuff. Very rare to get a chance to focus on what is it that is looking at the stuff, or what is it that is illumining the stuff. So keep trying to turn our attention from the objects, turn it to the subject, to the witness. See if you can get a sense of this empty space of awareness, the sky of awareness, some people call it. And in the sky, all the objects appear like clouds. There's a sensation, a thought, an emotion. They all appear in this awareness. They exist for some time, then they kind of dissolve and go back into nothingness or into this awareness. It's kind of like a smoke, a wisp of smoke appearing and then just disappearing into the sky. Just merges with the sky. That's kind of how all of our experiences appear to us. They exist for a while, they disappear into nothingness. But we want to notice the gap between one experience ending and the next one beginning. And in this gap, try to see if you can sense the space, the sky. Slowly bring your attention back into objective reality. Listen to sounds or back to your sensations in the body. And whenever you're ready, you may open your eyes again. Cool. Like every class, we're gonna end the class with a chant. Let me share my screen again. Feel free to join, or you can just listen. Yogarato va, bhogarato va, sangarato va, sangavihina, yasya brahmani ramate chitta, nandati nandati nandatyeva, nandati nandati nandatyeva. So the meaning of this verse is basically the entire teaching of yoga, which is, once we realize the self, we can enjoy everywhere, in company or in solitude. But if the mind has the capacity to travel in self, as the poetry says, then only that person knows how to really enjoy. Cool. So that was the end of the class, everyone. And I'm happy to hang out and answer any questions, any thoughts that may have come up. But thank you for participating and for all your questions and those wonderful discussions. I think that's like very critical to this class. Without those discussions, I don't think this would be very useful. So thank you. Appreciate you all for the questions and thoughts.